Hi friend, welcome to A Water Connection, a space created to learn, connect and multiply the power of a conversation to give visibility to the water industry. I'm Jess Borges, a passionate human who believes you should increase your water curiosity. Welcome to this new episode. Today, I'm joined by Adam Lovell. He has joined us to have a conversation about water utilities in Australia, but using more a national lens instead of the individual lens that we have explored a little bit in the previous episodes. Adam is the Executive Director of Water Services Association of Australia. He provides national leadership in policy positions for the Australian water sector on issues that include industry reform, livable cities, water quality, climate change, customer engagement, and asset management. Adam also holds a non-executive board role for the Global Water Research Coalition. Welcome to A Water Connection, Adam.
Great to be here. Really pleased to be here with you.
Thank you. A lot of what we might discuss today is directly related to what the Water Services Association of Australia, or WSAA from now on, does. So let us start with the basic question for everyone to be in the same page. Can you explain to us what is WSAA, and what is the role that it has in the water sector?
Really good question. There are a few bodies like us around the world, but effectively we're here to lift performance of all of our members, which is a utility. So we're the peak industry body primarily for all the water utilities around Australia, and we've got a couple of members in New Zealand as well. And our focus really is on collaboration amongst utilities, both at a CEO level, maybe a GM level as well, decision makers, but also at technical level. So we've got well over 70 committees and networks and communities of practice that work right across the water cycle. So that's our main aim, is to bring everybody together to share, unite and connect, and to really lift the performance of the whole sector. And at the same time, encourage our leading lights, the leading utilities in wherever they are around the country, in whatever format that they're leading, because each utility has its strengths. We really encourage that, and we try and break space for them to sort of crack into that area. And we try and do that at a federal level through advocacy. So a big part of my role is advocacy, both at a federal and a state level. I've met nearly every state water minister now around the country. Spent a fair bit of time flying around and meeting state ministers, talking about the National Water Initiative, talking about the 10 top priorities for the urban water sector from a utility perspective. So again, that's part of my role, or part of WSAA's role, is to advocate on behalf of the industry. I think a key consideration for people to remember is that water, particularly from a pipe supply, from a reticulated supply, is really in the hands of either a state government. So you've got a big state-owned corporation like a Sydney Water, or a water corporation, or an SA Water, through to a smaller local government organisation and a water utility embedded in there. But it's not at a federal level. So there are only a very few touch points at a federal level for urban water and pipe supplies and the sort of reticulated supplies you would expect for a region, for a town, for a community, for a city.
Yep, advocate and collaborate, certainly. For the part of like collaboration, and also, both of the objectives, I guess, WSAA needs to understand really, really well how different states and territories manages their water. And you went a little bit into that, talking there are some states that have big corporations. We have Water Corp in WA, and we have SA Water down here in South Australia where I'm based. Do all the states work like that? How do the other ones work? Would you mind to just give us a little bit of a brief?
Yeah, it's a real mixed bag. You'd think for Australia, in a relatively small population, we'd have relatively lined up, governance structures, institutional structures, but they're actually a little bit different. So you do have those states really in the western half of the country. So you've got Water Corporation, SA Water, and Param Water. So Param Water is Northern Territory. And then you've also got Tas Water that runs the whole of Tasmania. when you get into the other states, so Victoria's got a range of water corporations across the whole state. And then into Sydney, into New South Wales and Queensland, then you've got more of a capital city base. So you'll have Sydney Water and Hunter Water runs Newcastle and surrounds. And in southeast Queensland, you have urban utilities, SEQ Water, Unity Water. But then outside of the capital city space in New South Wales and Queensland, you've got local councils, and some of those team together into regional organisations, so they collaborate in a joint organisation type format, and that works really well as well. But from a governance perspective, that's run by that particular local government. So quite a variation across the country. And then from a regulatory point of view too, it's a little bit different. I guess the one key thing is Australian Drinking Water Guidelines is set through the National Health and Medical Research Council, which is a federal body based in Canberra. And then typically all of the states through their health departments would roll out the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines pretty much in full. And then EPAs are all different across the country, and economic regulation different across the country as well. So we are dealing with quite a diversity across the country. The one thing that we do know is that from an economic regulatory point of view, you have the ESC in Victoria, you have IPART in New South Wales, and you have ASCOSA in South Australia, and Otter in Tasmania, really moving towards a customer focus. So customer at the centre of everything that a utility does. And I think that's a really important step that we've made in the past decade from a utility perspective. Moved away from an engineering knows all format to really we want to understand where the customers are at. We want to know, because customers in Australia, particularly from at a capital city point of view, they're paying full freight. They're paying for everything. So why wouldn't you include them? I had a board member quite a while ago who used to say the worst thing a monopolist can do is act like a monopolist. And that's an important thing for a water utility, right? Because you are typically a natural monopoly, and it's incumbent on that natural monopoly to still interact with the customers and community that it serves.
That's true. Yeah, it shouldn't be like just because a water utility is responsible of this, they're not the ones that know all the answers, and then they really need to go and talk to the communities to see what is important. And you touch perfectly like on the differences between different states, and even in big capital cities, they're very different with such a wide range of like ways of governing urban water. How does an organization like WSAA actually balances those differences to provide support and value for the utilities? Because they all manage it so differently. They all have different needs. How do you do that? Yeah,
there's a bit of a black art to it. And it's often there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of networking behind the scenes. So the one good thing that we have in Australia is that we've got a really, really innovative and competent set of water utilities across the country who are doing their very best to deliver their 24/7 business. That's that core business rock solid approach. So you're making sure that your drinking water is up to standard, delivering 24/7. Same with your sanitation services. You're returning that water to the environment or recycling it to the right level. So that's your core business, and you've got to do that perfectly. And then once you've done that, then you can start thinking about, well, how else can I push the boundary here? And in particular, recently it's been the circular economy, and then also the blue-green grid type approach as well. And they're offering fantastic opportunities to water utilities. But getting back to your original question, how do we balance that across the states? What we tend to find is that most of the utilities tend to act. They're at the same sort of level. They're talking about the same sort of things. It's actually only minor variations around the edges, and particularly as it comes to economic regulation. But even then, the thing that really normalizes everything is that if you're fully in touch with your customers, fully in touch with your customers' needs, then it's almost the fact that that's your prime relationship, and you keep delivering to that service, and the other, the regulatory side will do what it needs to do. But as long as you're delivering to your customers, that's the right thing. So variations we find are not that large. It might be in terms of subject area expertise. That's where it might come in. And then, of course, when you're talking about remote services for First Nations communities, the real focus there has been really getting drinking water up to standard that it's safe to drink. That will be the core focus for the next decade. So you can sort of isolate, or you can sort of highlight those issues fairly readily. That's a good thing.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that now most of the utilities are like focused on the customers, and we talked how important that was. What triggered that change from like an engineering perspective and that into start thinking about customers? How did that happen?
I think a few stars aligned all at once.
Yeah.
I think in Australia, particularly on the East Coast, the end of the Millennium Drought, or the Millennium Drought and then the end of the Millennium Drought saw huge change. We were the industry second behind mining in terms of capital expenditure. And that's pretty hard to get your head around, because that means that ahead of transport, ahead of energy, we were spending more on capital than any other part of the sector. And mostly that came down to every capital city landed up with a desal plant. And I think in the planning for the mostly desalination plants, seawater desalination, there was a lot of discussion about recycled water and the role of recycled water, either in a non-drinking way or, to a certain extent, a drinking way, and that's happened in Perth. But what it did expose was really that governments and utilities were making the decisions without much input from its customers. And customers felt a little bit disenfranchised by that whole process. And even more so, that was exacerbated even more so because then the drought broke, and boy, did it break, So all of a sudden, we've got quite a few desalination plants sitting there doing nothing, and a lot of money has been spent on them. And so I think that sort of brought to the surface, okay, if you were to redo that, how would you redo it? And the one core component of that is really engaging with customers and community about what does the future of water security look like for your city, for your town, for your community, and that sort of really brought it on. I think there is another aspect to this. At the same time, the UK water industry, which we collaborate with quite strongly, was really taking a customer first attitude, approach, and we really borrowed a lot from the UK. And we still actually collaborate with them very strongly on customer engagement, and making sure that customers are at the centre of customers and community. And it's actually moving towards more community now than customer, but customers and community are at the forefront of decision making.
Yeah, I definitely had that question with like collaboration within international kind of organizations as well, because I saw that while I was reading about what WSAA does. But before going into there, we were talking about trends and like how we did things more in engineering perspective, and then there was a trend like triggered by all of this that you just explained to us, to have a customer focus and a community focus. What do you see that are all the trends, and you have mentioned some of those already, and priorities that Australian water utilities are having these days? You mentioned like some 10 priorities before, something along those lines. Like, what are those trends and priorities that are coming through that are now the priority for us?
Yeah, so we've put and it's available on our website for everybody to download. But we've got a 10-point plan, but it does cover what we've tried to do when we advocate at a national and federal level is, what does the future look like in not tomorrow, but what's the future look like in 10, 20, 30 years time? Because really that's the planning horizon we're going to be operating in. Most of the utilities, of course, assets are 50, 100 years old. Whether you've got the ability to plan that far ahead, I think is a bit more troublesome. But certainly in terms of the lifespan of major policy initiatives and the difference that it could make in the water industry, you do need to have that at least a 20-year time frame. And so we're casting our minds forward and looking at the impacts of approaching net zero. Again, most water utilities are probably the third or fourth biggest energy user in any particular urban circumstance. Big part of that, in fact, comes down to customers and their use of hot water as well. But that's beyond the role of the utility at that point in time. But water and particularly hot water is actually a really big user of energy as well. So how does net zero impact the whole water cycle? It sort of plays out in a strong way. But it does offer opportunities in areas that we've never really taken up before. And sort of when you look at the role of waste to energy, most water utilities are the biggest waste managers, again, in any particular urban situation. It just so happens that sitting in pipes that nobody sees. Everybody sees the trucks rolling around picking up waste day to day. But most of the waste is actually sitting in pipes and wastewater systems. And up until now, it's been more or less fully just treat it and return it back to the environment as safely as you can. But not knowing that it's a treasure trove of nutrients, it's a treasure trove of carbon, of heat, of really a lot of other things. And I've got to take my hat off to my our Dutch colleagues who now manage to recycle cellulose from toilet paper and use it in roads. So, that's the extent to which the circular economy is really offering opportunities for the industry. And so, around the country, there's some fantastic different approaches to this. Barwon Water, Yarra Valley Water, there's there's the renewable organics networks, there's the food waste to energy plant that Yarra Valley Water runs. There's many opportunities around the country, or many opportunities being taken by utilities around the country to access the treasure trove of wastewater and use it both from a circular economy point of view, but also attack net zero. And see where utilities can reduce their energy needs from the grid. So that's really an emerging trend. The other big trend, I think, which is maybe a little bit of a harder nut to crack, mostly because it involves a lot more touch points with planning with other sectors, is the role of blue-green grids in cooling cities. And I think that's going to be a really big challenge for us going forward with heat climbing through climate change impacts. There's a huge amount of potential for us to do a better job collectively in managing water to create cooler and greener livable communities through the use of both piped water, but also recycled stormwater and other, just using water better in an urban environment. And what the water industry is typically known for, of course, is its 24/7 business of drinking water, safe drinking water. But I would like to think that we can extend ourselves into more the population health, environmental health. How many hospital beds can we save from having a cooling effect by having that cooling effect? Better managing water to have that cooling effect, so heat stress is not presented in hospitals as much. Or what about the aspects of mental health, the demonstrated benefits of mental health from accessing green parks and trees? That's another part. So how many mental health beds could we save by managing water better? So I think these are a couple of really interesting and emerging topics that quite often in the past, through normal accounting mechanisms, you've never been able to use that in a benefit cost ratio circumstance. But why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we have a go at that? Why shouldn't we expand the remit of the water industry to really change society for the better?
Well, that's really interesting, Adam, because I've never thought about the water sector being involved even beyond supplying the water. How can we actually have like ripple effects, like in other sectors, and like really having that value enhanced. Is that a priority or a trend that you have seen already in other countries, like, and that comes from international maybe associations that WSAA has contact with? Because that's clearly a very interesting trend.
Very much so, very much so. And in fact, one of our members, Melbourne Water, has just entered into a collaboration with Aarhus Vand, which is in Denmark, Aarhus Water, and also Severn Trent Water in the UK. So there's a genuine international collaboration there. I know the focus of that is more around net zero, and they're actually starting off with a look at nitrous oxide measurements and the contribution of nitrous oxide from wastewater treatment to greenhouse gases. But I also know that they're talking very widely about the role of water utilities from a resource perspective, resource recovery. In fact, even Sydney Water has changed the name of most of its sewage treatment plants now to resource recovery centres or water resource centres. So it's both the water circular economy and then the broader circular economy too, and all of the touch points. I think the other thing to really offers up some fantastic opportunities in the circular economy is not just to focus on the resource recovery, because that's actually down at the other end of circular economy. It's sort of right at the front too. What about PFAS? Water utilities are actually, unfortunately, still the last point in the chain of removing PFAS from either wastewater treatment or water treatment to remove it from the water cycle. But the water sector itself is not responsible for putting PFAS there.
That is true.
So when you're thinking about the circular economy, these products should not even be there. So we've got to think about stopping them from getting into the water system. They're already there, they're forever chemicals, but how do we stop more of it getting there? And how do we think more about reducing the impact? And I think, again, too, looking at the circular economy, what about the regeneration of environment? So instead of just not harming the environment, what about regeneration of ecosystems, regeneration of environmental systems through wetlands and through nature-based solutions as well? So, it's exciting in some respects, a little bit daunting that many of our members could sort of have so many bigger touch points in the broader economy, but I think that's the future. And I think climate change is actually, in its own way, forcing us to think really broadly about the impacts and the mitigations and the adaptations that we have at our disposal, because we've never had to think about that so deeply before.
Yeah, that's true. And I think what we need to shift a bit is just stop working like in silos in different industries. Like the water industry is doing this, and then the textiles doing this, and then whoever does the plastics doing this, and because right now, like if we don't gather and then we just have something that is across sectors that is solving the issues, like we're simply not going to get there at any point in time. Yeah. Adam, what would be your message to young water professionals that might be listening to you right now and are very inspired by everything that you have been saying?
Explore and innovate. They're the two words that I would say, and show initiative. There you go. There's three words: explore, show initiative, or it's probably four, and innovate. I mean, they're the three things which I think you can do to really. We're running. I hate to say it, but we are running out of time. The clock is ticking on the impact of climate change, and we're seeing more and more extreme events. We're seeing not just from water supply perspective. It's all the hazards that come along with it. It's bushfires that are more and more dangerous. It's storms that are more and more dangerous. That impacts all parts of the water cycle from an infrastructure perspective as well. In terms of net zero, what sort of renewable energy in the renewable energy space, where can we play? Where's the water industry best? Is it pumped hydro? Is it hydrogen? Is it still food waste to energy, or is it all three? I would say, if you're a young water professional, the water space is one of the best spaces to be in. It offers so many opportunities. It is the industry with purpose like no other. And because of both the focus on community, because of the focus on vulnerable customers, and that could be remote First Nations customers as well, and then also the focus on technology and innovation, so many opportunities. So get out there and innovate. Show us what can be done, basically, because there are so many opportunities and such a need for it, such a need to innovate and drive for a better world.
Yeah, certainly. We have been talking about some of those trends and some of those challenges in this in this conversation. So I always finish with like one question. Adam, why do you work in the water industry?
Good question. I started in the water industry straight out of university, practically. So I did a Bachelor of Science. I did honours in chemistry, and my first job, in fact, was at Angling Water in the UK. I'd just done a bit of backpacking around the world, and I decided I'd try and get a job in the water industry, and I managed to get a job at Angling Water. So that was my first foray into the water industry. Then I came back to Sydney in Australia, and I started working with Sydney Water, and I loved it. I love the diversity of it. I love the people that work in the industry. And again, I'm just every year, every day, every month, there's new opportunities, and there's great opportunities to get into areas that you mightn't have thought of before. But it's providing the most essential of essential services. And I think that's what gets me out of bed every day, is that I'm part of that, the most essential of essential services. And I feel like every day I've got a part to play. I'm not out there operating treatment plants, and people that do, I take my hat off to them because they're dedicated people. I take my hat off to all the planners out there. I take my hat off to all the consultants and to the researchers. Everybody's got a part to play in the water industry. And I love it because of its purpose, and I love it because it's so essential for life.
Yeah, that was very inspiring. Clearly, yeah, we no individual can do it all, but like each one of us has like a role to play, and then we make sure that we work together. We certainly are in the right path to just work on those challenges that we have today.
Yep.
Yeah. Adam, thank you very much for your time today. This was very inspiring, very informative. We touched like from what was that to like how different states manage human water in a different way, to like trends and challenges, and then why working in water. So it was like a lot of fun, like to have this conversation with you today.
That's great. I'm really pleased to have joined you.
Thank you. And to you, my friend, thank you very much for tuning in and listening to this episode of Our Water Connection. I hope you enjoyed the ride with Adam today. Follow us on LinkedIn as Our Water Connection to hear more about next episodes, and see you next time.